The Daughter of Blossom Street. Story 1959. As it turns out, I don't need any hurricane warnings over the 7 a.m. news and weather to tell me today will be a bad day. First thing when I come down the third floor hall of the clinic's building to open up the office, I find a pile of patients' records waiting for me just outside the door, punctual as the morning paper, but it is a thin pile, ensures Thursday's a full day with us. I know I'll have to spend a good half hour phoning every station in the record room to chase those missing records down. Already, so early in the morning, my white eyelet blouse is losing starch and I can feel a little wet patch spreading under each arm. The sky outside is low, thick, and yellow as hollandaise. I shove open the one window in the office to change the air. Nothing happens. Everything hangs still, heavier than wet laundry in a basement. Then I cut the string around the record folders, and staring up at me from the cover of the top record, I see stamped in red ink, "Dead, dead, dead." I try to make the letters out to read deaf, only it doesn't work. Not that I'm superstitious, even though the ink is smeared rusty as blood on the cover of the case history. It simply means Lillian Ulmer is dead, and number 91706 canceled in the record room's active file for once and forever. Grim Billy at Station 9 has mixed the numbers up again, meaning me no harm. Still and all, with the sky so dark and the hurricane rumbling up the coast, closer every time I turn around, I feel Lillian Ulmer, rest her soul, has started my day off on the wrong foot. When my boss, Miss Taylor, comes in, I ask why they don't burn the records of the people gone to Blossom Street to save room in the files. But she says they often keep the records around a bit if the disease is interesting, in case there might be a statistical survey of patients who lived or died with it. It was my friend Dottie Berrigan, an alcoholic clinic, told me about Blossom Street. Dottie took it on herself to show me around the hospital when I first signed on as secretary in adult psychiatric, she being right down the hall from me and we sharing a lot of cases. "You must have a lot of people dead here every day," I said. "You bet," she said, "and all the accidents and beatings up you could want from the South End coming into emergency wards steady as taxes." "Well, where do they keep them, the dead ones?" I didn't want suddenly by mistake to walk into a room of people laid out or cut up, and it seemed only too easy at that point for me to get lost in the numberless levels of corridors in the greatest general hospital in the world. "In a room off Blossom Street. I'll show you where. The doctors never say anyone died in so many words, because of making the patients morbid. They say, 'How many of yours went to Blossom Street this week?' And the other guy'll say, 2 or 5 or however many, because the Blossom Street exit's where the bodies get shipped off to the funeral parlors to be fixed up for burying. You can't beat Dottie. She's a regular mine of information, having to go about as she does, checking for alcoholics in emergency ward and comparing notes with the doctors on duty in psychiatric ward. Not to mention her dating various members of the hospital staff, even a surgeon once, and another time a Persian intern. Dottie is Irish, shortish and a little plump, but she dresses to make the best of it, always something blue. Heaven blue to match her eyes and these snug black jumpers she runs off herself from Vogue patterns, and high pumps with the spindly steel heels. Cora, in psychiatric social service down the hall from Dottie and me, is nowhere near the person Dottie is. Pushing 40, you can tell it by the pleats around her eyes, even if she does keep her hair red thanks to these colored rinses. Cora lives with her mother, and to hear her talk, you'd think she was a green teenager. She had 3 of the girls in nerve clinic over her place one night for bridge and supper, and stuck the casserole into the oven with the frozen raspberry tarts, and wondered an hour later why they weren't warm when all the time she hadn't thought to turn the oven on. Cora keeps taking these bus trips to Lake Louise and these cruises to Nassau on her vacations to meet Mr. Wright. But all she ever meets is girls from tumor clinic or amputee clinic, and every one of them on the self-same mission. Anyhow, the third Thursday of the month being the day we have our secretaries' meeting in the Hunwell room on the second floor, Cora calls for Dottie, and the 2 of them call for me, and we click-clack on our heels down the stone stairs and into this really handsome room, dedicated, as it says on a bronze plaque over the door, to Dr. Augustus Hunwell in 1892. The place is full of glass cases crammed with old-fashioned medical instruments, and the walls are covered with faded reddish-brown tintypes of Civil War doctors, their beards bushy and long as the beards of the Smith brothers on those cough drop packets. Set in the middle of the room and stretching almost from wall to wall is a great dark oval walnut wood table, legs carved in the shape of lion's legs, only with scales instead of fur, and the whole top polished so you can see your face in it. Around this table we sit smoking and talking, waiting for Mrs. Rafferty to come in and start the meeting. Minnie Dapkins, the tiny white-haired receptionist in skin, is handing around pink and yellow referral strips. This is a Dr. Crawford in nerve? Is there a Dr. Crawford in nerve? She asks, holding up a pink slip. Dr. Crawford, Mary Ellen in nerve bursts out laughing, her black bulk jiggling like a soft aspic in the flowered print dress. He's dead 6, 7 years. Who wants him? Minnie purses her mouth to a tight pink bud. A patient said she had Dr. Crawford. She returns coldly. Minnie can't stand disrespect for the dead. She's been working at the hospital since she was married in the Depression and just got her 25-year silver service pin at a special ceremony at the secretary's Christmas party last winter. But the story goes she hasn't cracked a joke about a patient or a dead person in all her time. Not like Mary Ellen or Dottie or even Cora, who isn't above seeing the humor in a situation. What are you girls going to do about the hurricane? Cora asked Dottie and me in a low voice, leaning across the table to dab off her cigarette ash in the glass ashtray with the hospital seal showing through the bottom. I'm worried blue about my car. That motor gets wet in a sea breeze, it stops dead. Oh, it won't hit till after we're through with work, Dottie says, casual as usual. You'll make it home. I still don't like the look of the sky. Cora wrinkles her freckled nose as if she smelled something bad. I don't much like the look of the sky either. The room has been darkening steadily since we came in until we are now all sitting in a kind of twilight, smoke drifting up from our cigarettes and hanging its pall in the already dense air. For a minute, no one says anything. Cora seems to have spoken out loud everybody's secret worry. Well, what's the matter with us girls? We're gloomy as a funeral. The electric lights in the 4 copper lamp bowls overhead flash on, and almost magically the room brightens, shutting the stormy sky off in the distance where it belongs, harmless as a painted stage backdrop. Mrs. Rafferty steps up to the head of the table, her silver bangles making a cheerful music on each arm, her pendant earrings, exact replicas in miniature of stethoscopes, bouncing gaily from her plump earlobes. With an agreeable flurry, she sets her notes and papers down on the table, her tinted blonde chignon gleaming under the lights like a cap of mail. Even Cora can't be sour-faced in front of such professional sunniness. We'll get our affairs cleared up in a jiffy, and then I've told one of the girls to send in the coffee machine, and we'll have a little pick-me-up. Mrs. Rafferty glances around the table, absorbing with a gratified smile the exclamations of good feeling. Give her credit, Dottie mutters in my ear. The old girl ought to market it. Mrs. Rafferty starts out with one of her jolly scoldings. Mrs. Rafferty is really a buffer between us and the hierarchies of administration, and a buffer between us and the doctors with their odd, endless follies and foibles, their illegible handwriting. I've seen better in kindergarten myself, Mrs. Rafferty is reported to have said. Their childlike inability to paste prescriptions and reports on the right page in the patient's record books and so on. Now, girls, she says, raising one finger playfully, I'm having all sorts of complaints about the daily statistics. Some of them are coming down without the clinic stamp or date. She pauses to let the enormity of this sink in. Some aren't added correctly, some, another pause, aren't coming down at all. I lower my eyes and try to will away the blush I feel rising to heat my cheeks. The blush is not for myself, but for my boss, Miss Taylor, who confided to me shortly after my arrival that, to be perfectly open and above board, she hates statistics. Our patients' interviews with the staff psychiatrists often run over the clinic's official closing time. And of course, Miss Taylor can't get the statistics turned in downstairs every night unless she's going to be more of a martyr to the office than she is anyway. Enough said, girls. Mrs. Rafferty glances down at her notes, bends to make a check mark with her red pencil, and straightens, easy as a reed. Another thing, Record Room says they're getting a lot of calls for records you already have on hand in your hold boxes, and they're simply infuriated down there. Infuriated is right, Mary Ellen groans good-naturedly, rolling her eyes so for a minute nothing but the whites are showing. That guy, what's his name, at Station 9 acts like we shouldn't call in at all, anyhow. Oh, that's Billy, says Minnie Dapkins. I decline and a couple of the other girls from the typing pool in the first basement titter among themselves and then hush up. I guess you girls all know by now, Mrs. Rafferty sends a meaning smile around the table. Billy's got troubles of his own, so let's not be too hard on him. Isn't he seeing somebody in your clinic? Dottie asks me in a whisper. I just have time to nod when Mrs. Rafferty's clear green eyes silences us like an ice bath. I've got a complaint myself, Mrs. Rafferty, Cora puts in, taking advantage of the interruption. What's going on down there at admissions, I wonder? I tell our patients to come in an hour early for appointments with the girls in social service so they'll have plenty of time to get through the line downstairs and pay the cashier and all, and that's still not early enough. They call up frantic from downstairs, 10 minutes late already, and say the line's not moving for half an hour. And the social service girls on my end are waiting too, so what should I do in a case like that? Mrs. Rafferty's eyes dropped for the briefest moment to her notes, as if she had the answer to Cora's question outlined there. She seems almost embarrassed. Some of the girls have complained of that too, Cora, she says, finally looking up. We're short a girl at admissions, so it's a terrible job to do all the processing. Can't they get a go? Mary Ellen asked boldly. I mean, what's holding them up? Mrs. Rafferty exchanges a quick look with Minnie Dapkins. Minnie rubs her pale, papery hands together and licks at her lips in that rabbity way she has. Outside the open windows, a small window has suddenly risen, and it sounds as if it's beginning to rain, though it is probably only the rustle and scrape of paper starting to blow about down the street. I guess I may as well come straight out and tell everybody, Mrs. Rafferty says then. Some of you know already. Minnie here knows. The reason we're holding up filling that position is... Emily Rousseau, you tell them, Minnie. Emily Rousseau, Minnie announces with funereal awe, has got cancer. She's in this hospital right now. I want to tell you, anybody who knows her, she might like company. She still can have visitors on account of she's got no kin to stand by. Gee, I didn't know that, Mary Ellen says slowly. That's a shame. It was the last cancer check showed it up, says Mrs. Rafferty. She's just hanging on by a thread. Those new drugs help with the pain, of course. The only thing is, sick as she is, Emily's counting on coming back to her job. She loves that job. It's been her life these 40 years, and Dr. Gilman doesn't want to tell her the hard facts as to how she isn't ever going back for fear of giving her a shock and all. Everybody who comes in to see her, she asks, is the job filled yet? Have they got anybody yet down in admissions? The minute that job's filled, Emily will think it's her own death warrant. Plain and simple.